Perfect, guys. Alex is just letting the final few people in, but we'll get started right away here. My name is Anand Pai. I'm the Executive Director at NAIOP Edmonton. And thanks for coming to NAIOP Developing Leaders 20 Questions event with Darin Rayburn, founder of Foray Developments, hosted by Alex Shaw, who is our Developing Leader Chair this year. Alex is with AIMCO. And I just wanted to start us off by saying we've got a great list of events coming up. We'll be back in person starting in March, and the Developing Leaders new committee has a great list of events. So stay tuned for that. More information coming out right away. Also wanted to just touch on really quickly before I pass it off to Alex. The NAIOP Developing Leaders program. Not everyone in the room here is a developing leader. And not all developing leaders events are only for people under 35, but the developing leader program is for folks under 35 to connect with industry leaders, work on building a network, and kind of get into the industry through NAIOP. So the next time you get a NAIOP email from NAIOP Developing Leaders, and if it's something that looks good, feel free to forward it around. It's the easiest way to get in on what's happening in the industry and get in on what's happening at NAIOP. And so we get a lot of emails and calls after the fact about events, and just wanted to make that offer to everybody. I'll just share a quick story. When I started at NAIOP just about 5 years ago, my second day was the first day that the arena opened. And we did a 20 questions with Bob Black, and there was 20 people at the boardroom, and you know, it was this. I was thinking to myself, I walked into the room and I thought, how awesome is this opportunity for 20 people to shake hands and actually say hello? And we have that opportunity today. It's virtual. With Darin, and I just that's why I bring up at the beginning that this is just a really great opportunity. So thanks for doing it, Darin, and pass it off to Alex.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to this one. So just kind of a background for Darin. Darin is the founder of Foray Development Corp and recently retired president and CEO of Melcor Developments and Melcor REIT. Darin's been in commercial real estate since 1991 and has been a senior executive for over 15 years. So Darin would have joined Melcor in 2002 with responsibility of leading the company's investment property team and building the company portfolio across Western Canada and United States. Since 2002, him and his team grew Melcor's commercial assets from over 643,000 feet to over 4.4 million in 7 asset classes. He also co-led the successful IPO for the REIT in 2013 and led the REIT to stable results in spite of ongoing market volatility. So Darin, welcome, and thank you very much for doing this today. And,
well, thanks, Alex, and hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to dial in.
And ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started, Alex.
Let's do it. We'll start off with an easy one. So why did you choose real estate as a career?
It's actually not an easy one, just so you know. And just for everyone's benefit too, and Anand knows me and some of you know me, and you're just going to get the raw, unabridged version. So I hope I don't disappoint anyone and think there's some real secret magic in this sauce. Question number one, I didn't choose real estate. It sort of chose me. And, you know, the short version is I got my undergrad at U of A. I wrote my LSAT. Truthfully, I did okay. I didn't do like fantastic. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just sort of see what's out there in the world and get a job, and got a job, and the world was changing at that time, and got laid off, and had a friend who I knew from Lethbridge, played hockey with, and his brother worked at Heritage Mall, which many of you are too young to know what Heritage Mall is. We're Century Places now. And he needed some help. And I didn't know what that meant, but I wasn't doing anything. So I started helping him at Heritage Mall. And, you know, malls to me were always like a place I went and hung out. I didn't think about the leasing and the financing and the operations and all that side of it too. So, you know, I hung around there for a month or two. And then at that time, Cambridge Shopping Centers had this fantastic trainee program. It was specifically designed for people that knew nothing about real estate. And they'd hire you in a trainee program, and you would spend, you know, a week with the maintenance people going through the building. You spend a week with the leasing people. You spend a week with the finance people. It was actually a really cool way to get a feel for it. So I was still in my year off between undergrad and what I thought would be law school, and got my job at Cambridge. And to this day, I'm still in my year off. And the path sort of took me down a very fortunate and thankful road that I was on.
Excellent. Moving on. So just kind of building off of that, what traits do you think are most essential to be successful in this industry?
You know, there's a whole bunch of appropriate technical answers, but I think it comes down to being able to, you know, understand relationships and build relationships. And it's very cliche. Everyone talks about that, but like truly understanding, being empathetic and listening and doing all those parts of it. And I'll tell you what, COVID really opened my eyes too, because, you know, when there's a catastrophic event where there's something, you know, really beyond our scope that happens, you sort of learn where your relationships stand. I've had experience over the years, and, you know, 2008, 2009 was a weird time in the world, and you kind of understood who your friends were or weren't. But again, we're ultimately all salespeople at all time, no matter what we're doing in real estate. But you have to A, be believable, and B, the relationships are what you have to fall back on. So again, I think that's an important trait.
Absolutely. So moving on, can you name a person that had a, you know, tremendous impact on you as a leader, you know, a mentor or someone like that? And how did this person impact your life?
Sure. You know, this is a question I've been asked before, and it's a hard one because you never want to offend anyone.
Yeah, exactly. The list is long.
So fortunate. Exactly. List them all off. But, you know, people that I worked with when I was younger, people that I worked with at Melcor up until my last day, like there's so many in that too. But if you're talking about someone like as a leader that had an impact on me when I was younger, I think, you know, Lauren Braithwaite, you know, he was a U of A Alberta grad, started Cambridge Shopping Centers. I didn't get a lot of time to spend with him, but as a junior person in the company, they really made an effort to come out and introduce yourself. So I thought it was kind of cool that the CEO of Cambridge Shopping Centers came to Edmonton to, you know, meet little old Darin Rayburn. And Lauren was just a regular guy. And I mean, I saw Lauren just before COVID as well, and he really hasn't changed in that long a time. So I think that was important. But the next person who I think probably had, you know, a much bigger impact on me when I was younger was John Love. So I had the pleasure of working for Oxford Properties for 9 years. And, you know, John is well known. We all follow him. I mean, John is driven. He's a visionary. You know, John taught me don't show up late for a meeting because he'll lock the door. And anyone who's worked at Oxford knows that. And I'll tell you what, you just learn. We used to say 5 minutes early is on time. But the other thing John taught me was like the power of your team. You know, he scaled up Oxford and then sold it. And, you know, you see what he's done with KingSett now. But, you know, he scaled up his team. And John is someone I've always sort of relied on for advice. And to John's credit, like even going through COVID, when things started, I called him. I'm like, I'm running these two companies. Like, what do we do? So John's always been there and continues to be a mentor. And then, you know what? I spent 19 years at Melcor Developments. I worked with, you know, Tim Melton, Andy Melton, Ralph Young, you know, just, you know, people in industry who've been here a long time, learned so much from them. But even, you know, the next sort of set of generations at Melcor, there's still great, wonderful people there. We all went through battle together. And, you know, when you think about sort of who had an impact on my life, well, heck, you know, we started a second company in 2013, you know, right after the recession started, and went through all kinds of things together. So lots of people, lots of impact. And I think that's an important part of the industry. Like really everyone we deal with should have some form of impact, whether it's good or bad.
Kind of a sideward, do you think it's kind of important to have like different mentors kind of in different parts of your career? Like you're kind of starting off, so like a senior executive, and then middle, you're kind of like then helping mentor someone else while you have someone else mentoring you. Like, do you find it very important to kind of give back and also receive mentorship throughout the process?
Absolutely, because you know what, like we're all always learning. And you know, I talked about when Lauren Braithwaite came out to say hi. Well, it's pretty hard to relate to him. You know, like he was, you know, as you go in your career, you just sort of anytime and sort of love like passing on the information. And don't kid yourself. And you know, and you and I talked about this. We met for coffee one day. I said, like, I get as much from these things as anyone else does. So, yeah, great question, Alex. And I think it changes as you go through your career.
Excellent. Kind of moving on to the Melcor side of your time there. I mean, growing that portfolio as you did over the time frame is incredibly impressive. Like, what were the biggest obstacles you overcame, kind of expanding the portfolio through the years? It's not a small feat.
It's not. And again, we got fantastic support from our board, you know, from ownership, from our team. But, you know, at one point, you know, when we started in 2002, real estate was relatively cheap. But the biggest obstacle has always been the same obstacle, is it's your perception of that time. You know, if I could go back now, the buildings that I bought for $55, $60 a foot, I would have bought 100 of them. But at that time, the market was, half empty. Like even that seemed like a bit of a stretch. So, sometimes obstacles are you're in a market for too long and you see a building and you know the skeletons of it. And beyond that, the other thing too, I mean, when you grow quick, you have to do it with cash and funding, and you can get ahead of yourself on that. And then one of the things that my property management team learned is we grew very quick, and then you try and catch up with the infrastructure.
Yep.
And that can be very difficult. But
did you find it was hard to scale up with hiring the effective people to run this? Were you guys pretty lean in the early days and then kind of scaled up, or?
Melcor's been lean and is notorious for being lean. It's kind of and so I remember the conversations with the property management team. Oh, here's another building. Here's another building. Here's another building. And then it's like, okay, we probably need some help. But, I don't ever want to say buying is easy, because buying's difficult, but then actually leasing and managing it and generating the revenue you promised you're going to generate, that's the hard part.
That's always the joke, is the day at closing, it's the worst day, because now we actually have to perform, right? It's all fun until you close.
And when you're in a public company, everything's public. So they know what your projections were and the rest of it. So you're fully accountable.
Exactly. Kind of moving on, can you kind of provide us a specific example when it comes to development, kind of an obstacle you guys would have seen and overcome? I'd pick one, I guess, or a couple.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a bunch over here, but the one I think that jumps to mind, which it's sort of an obstacle beyond our control, was when we bought Lethbridge Center. Our plan was to redevelop it like Meadowlark Mall, big shopping center. Bring in Alberta Health Services, bring in clinics. Like the concept was there, and when we bought it, we were in conversations with the provincial government to do a large clinic there. There was an old food store that left, then there's a call center that left. So there was like a couple 100,000 square feet empty in a building we bought. And so it was the catalyst to develop everything around it. We literally, and for those of you that do leasing with the government, that it's sort of the opposite. Like we sign first as owners and the government signs last. So we signed up, we're ready to go. And literally the next day was when the provincial government said, okay, everything's on hold, we're cutting backward. And I remember being shell shocked. It's like, okay, we just made a 500,000 square foot purchase, the biggest asset Melcor's ever bought, made all these promises to our board and shareholders about the strategy. And then the government decided to stop, and we didn't really have a plan B. And it was after the panic, to sort of make a long story short, we stayed in contact with the government throughout this, and we tried to deal with different people, deal with the user groups at Child Services, at Alberta Health Services, the rest of it. Year and a half later, it came back together and it happened. But that was a pretty long, tumultuous year and a half trying
Absolutely.
to figure out. But so obstacles, Alex, like that are just, and it's COVID, like things that no one sees coming. But yet, as a human race, as real estate people, here we are, like we all kind of figure out how to go through it and get out the other side. It's just about never giving up.
Absolutely. On to the next one. I mean, this is a big one. It's definitely not common in Edmonton, especially for an IPO to happen, especially on the real estate side. I mean, kind of describe that process of, you had the development arm and then moving towards kind of, that structured REIT. What was the process like, and what challenges did it bring forth?
Sure. First of all, the process was terrifying. I'd never done it before, right? And Melcor Developments went public in, the early 70s, late 60s. So it had been public and had the infrastructure in place. But at that time, we were looking at options. We at Melcor were looking at options because we had this commercial portfolio that grew, but our shares in the company didn't really grow. Yeah. So we didn't really know what Melcor was. And we thought, well, how do we get value? And that was, in 2012, REITs were we thought, well, here's an opportunity to take $500 million in assets and spin it into go on the road, and away you go. And so we had to learn the process. I spent time in Toronto, walk 15 REITs. So it was see each other in the lobbies of the buildings. But I'll tell you what, you sure know if you know your business quickly, because some of the institutional investors, would ask you direct questions about your business. Why are we doing this? Why should I invest with you? There are other ones that you could tell they were just taking the meetings to take the meeting. But the challenge is you have a vision about an asset class in Western Canada, and that's what you're pitching. And, you're talking about the history and the values and the rest of it. But to IPO, you come up with a price that you hope the market accepts, and you come up with a minimum. And so like, if you don't hit that threshold, you don't IPO. So you do all the work, spend all the money. And like literally we were the week before wanting to launch in May in 2013, you're not quite sure who's in and who's not. And you'd leave some meetings and you'd think, wow, they ask a ton of questions. Like they're 100% investing and they wouldn't give a dime. And then you'd leave another meeting and you think that they didn't care, and you get an order. So it was kind of like, our investment bankers would have a running tab and they'd be like, okay, got another one. But right up until the day before you launch, it's a go, no go. And so if you're at the point where you're not getting buy-in at your unit price, you have to decide whether you go or not. Your yield, right? Because a lot of people are buying it based on the return. So play with the yields. You're competing with other REITs, like all that stuff sort of all comes together. So it's a pretty intense process. I lost a lot of weight, had a lot of stress through that.
How long was the process? Like, was it kind of like 2 years in the making, a year in the making? Like,
yeah, the back of the house stuff went on, probably over a year. The real intense stuff was like the 5 months prior, and then like literally 2 months prior.
Yeah.
Where, we spent more money. I mean, it's a race, and you have a deadline and you say, okay, let's see if we can get there.
Yeah. And I take it, you have to be fully transparent with all institutional investors and stuff. So you really aren't able to hide anything. What's the joke? It's open to the kimono a little bit and everyone can see.
Well, it's true.
Feel through.
You also, as when you're asking them to invest, they're living the sins of the past. So if someone else charged too many fees, like I remember when we were trying to launch, fees were big because there were a couple of REITs that charged significant fees. So, you could see, you'd go into a meeting and you'd see your prospectus, and that page would have a bunch of yellow sticky notes on it. So I knew they were going to ask fee questions. And to your point, Alex, what got us through that? Open book.
Yep.
Here's the fees, and one of the things we decided as a strategy at Melcor, we weren't the highest, we weren't the lowest. We were kind of mid-range fees, but we were clear on why we get fees. And, Melcor Developments was also a significant investor in the REIT and maintained ownership. So there were many times where I looked at the investors and said, well, like half of it's ours, so we're not going to overfee ourselves.
Perfect.
It was interesting. It was fun. It was learning. If I did it again, there might be some things I do a little different, but nothing significant.
Would you want to do it again? I guess that's the question.
I've been asked that a couple of times. I got to tell you, like, it's the IPO process, while intense it is, it's like doing a deal, right? It's like any deal.
Yep.
A deal that has last minute turns and twists, and you're just waiting for people to sign. And, once it's done, would I do it again? Maybe. We'll see what the future brings. It's a different world right now.
Yeah.
But you never know what the future brings, Alex.
Absolutely. Kind of moving on. So what do you think the major trends and opportunities are for investors in today's climate? I know kind of moving, there's been some positivity of restrictions easing, but it's almost like we're back to the drawing board kind of every year. So how do you kind of see this all shaping out, and where's the opportunities lie?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it keeps changing. I think about the narrative, when we sent everyone home, they're never coming back, right? And offices are doomed and they're down. And, Google and Apple and everyone else, Facebook said, we're going to close our offices. And then a year later, those three organizations lease hundreds of thousands of square feet in Ottawa. It was like the biggest short I've ever seen. Good on them.
Yeah.
And then there was like, well, everyone's coming back. And so my point with those stories is COVID and information it keeps changing. But I think one of the things that is true, and I remember hearing Ed Sunshine, the former CEO of RioCan before he retired, he said, like, people are social beings. And like, yes, we can talk about flex work and we can talk about this stuff, but the reality is that people like to get together. And, we were talking about this, Alex, doing this in a boardroom.
Yeah.
And so when you look at opportunities, I think that everyone talks about like the reuse of space, vertical farms, different things, distribution, industrial, the rest of it. And they're trying to find ways to reuse office. I don't think office is dead yet by any means, but I do think that the world has to figure out what that new office looks like. Is it more open space? Is it less open space? But, when it comes down to like opportunities, you kind of have to stay ahead of the next trend. And, honestly, I didn't see in April and May of 2020, I didn't see like industrial taking off during COVID. Like there's certain things I just, and maybe I missed it, maybe other people did, but it always cycles. Like we can talk about this and not even during COVID. Again, I remember when department stores were going dark everywhere. And so call centers came to Alberta and they leased call center space. And like, that was the answer, then call centers left and then, co-working space have come out. So I still think the opportunities is as real estate people, we have to solve a problem for our clients. And so we just need to figure out what that problem is and how we can just repurpose space to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing seeing over the last 2 years, there's like a huge shift to like, the beds and sheds rhetoric and stuff like that. I mean, open air retail absolutely thrives kind of in this. Like COVID was kind of almost the death of the enclosed malls, but it's again, like, who knows what happens in 2 years? Like you said, we really have to just sit back and adapt to this changing landscape.
Yeah, totally.
Moving on. So kind of, in your opinion, what key metrics to look for in any new property investment?
Return on equity is really important. It kind of gets lost in the return on investment and all the rest of it too. But like to me, every asset I've ever bought, either personally or even from Melcor, you have to have a vision and you have to have a story and there has to be upside and you have to guess what that upside is. But to me, my hedge was always, okay, if the upside isn't quite what we think, are we covering our bills in the meantime? And so, it's to me, it's the cash on cash return on equity on existing income if you're buying existing buildings. Now, clearly, when you're doing development, that's different. You have to do it based on lease time up and the rest of it too. But again, I think what COVID's shown a lot of people is, assumptions can change really quickly. And then, what do you deal with? And, one of the things that I learned at my time at Melcor, because remember, Melcor is one of the very few development companies that survived the 80s in Alberta. And it was close. You hear Tim and Ralph tell the story, like there was times where it was really, really close. But, they always said, like the over leveraging, and we all know that, but we all do it, right? Over leveraging is a dangerous thing. And, when crap hits the fan, you better make sure you can pay your bank, because if you can't, then it's up to your bank whether you survive or not. So again, back to the whole cash on cash return. You need to figure out if it's going to take you longer than you think to get positive income, you better be able to afford that. And if you think it's going to take you 6 months, you better be able to afford a year just in case.
Excellent. Kind of building off of that is, so, I mean, looking at an investment or development, it's kind of, we say, is it like, the gut feeling or analytics? What kind of drives it? I mean, it's a kind of a combination of both. I mean, one of the funniest jokes I heard about underwriting was, if you show me a perfect pro forma, I'll show you a liar. Like they're never always true, but I mean, what's kind of your thesis on that?
Yeah. And before I answer that, I'll tell you, it's another John Loveism. He would always love to live in year 3 of the 5-year budget, because year 3 was always increasing and it was just far enough away that we could adjust it. So John Love would always say to me, Rayburn, I'd love to live in your year 3. Like, okay. Anyways, you know what? So I've been criticized a little bit about this. I think it's a combination of both, but I still think you have to stand on the dirt. I think gut is most important because you have to defend it and you have to sell it. I think the analytics will help with me with the opposite. Like I've never been like analytics first and then is it going to work? It's the complete opposite. Like, and I learned that, and especially when I was buying land from Melcor in the US, you're on Google Earth and you see this dirt and it looks pretty good, and you're going to buy it, and you go down there and realize there's a dairy farm a quarter mile in, and like no one is buying a house there. So again, the analytics there would have shown that the market was prime, all that kind of stuff. It was the dairy farm smell that you sort of, and again, you only discover that when you go stand on it yourself.
And kind of through experience, I would say, like in our industry, right, you kind of learn the little nitpicky things of real estate the more you kind of grow in your career. So that's
well, Alex, and I mean this wholeheartedly, like I could have, if you're buying existing buildings, every building has hair. You just got to figure out, are you estimating, is that roof really $100,000 or is it $300,000? And is that elevator going to last a year or 10 years? And so you got to sort of figure that out.
Absolutely. So kind of a different one, kind of on like the partnership side. So what factors do you think are most important or deal breakers to ensure a successful partnership or joint venture? I mean, this can be with companies or just even, business partners, kind of anything else, anybody you kind of deal with in the industry.
And I'll tell you the cool thing about being at Melcor, and I've lost count, I think there's 39 partnerships with all other developers, with landowners, with investors. And so, Melcor is a company that it's very important to be aligned. And so I think alignment is really important. And when I talk about alignment, it's like, is someone in it for the quick flip or the long haul? Also, you can have as many agreements, development, management agreements in place, but there needs to be a trust factor. And so we've always said, and I learned that, like, if our partners at Melcor didn't trust us to make the right decision to develop, then we probably shouldn't be partners. And so I think that's important. Also, I think you have to establish early on what your roles are, because there's been a couple of situations where, partners have an expectation of a certain answer level, approval level. And you just need to make sure that those expectations are clear, because you don't want to get into something new and then have people feel like they're being left out on purpose.
You say it's discussed alignment. Would you kind of make sure other partners are kind of they have an equity stake as well? I mean, that's kind of the easiest way to make sure they're aligned is if they got skin in the game. Is that pretty important in your perspective?
Absolutely. And I believe in that in anything. And even the stuff that I've done outside of Melcor personally, like if you have any partners, I mean, just my opinion, there are people that have done very well and and their return is based on fees. But I think you have to have skin in the game. And, back to the IPO question, Alex, first question in most meetings from the institutional investors, Darin, how much do you own? Like, they wanted to know, like, and I did, which was great. And at first it's funny. I thought, should I tell them that? And after about 3 meetings, I'm like, no, okay. I can sit down and say, listen, I believe in this. Like, I've got my net worth tied up in this company.
Absolutely. Super important. There's a big one. How do you think technology is transforming real estate? I mean, kind of going through your career, it's probably changed quite a bit through how you would do a PSA back then to everything is done now. It's kind of come full circle.
How about touring space online now?
Yeah.
But you know what? I think the technology's made it more, let's see here. How can I say more sophisticated? Mm-hmm. Gone are the days where you just, have a faxed brochure and away you go. I think it's made people more accountable. Truthfully, I am encouraged by how quickly, prop tech is becoming part of the conversation, and people are realizing there's more, because, bricks and mortar real estate has always had this reputation of being like this old historical, boring kind of business, and away you go. And so I think technology is changing that. Also, I think as an investor in REITs or public companies, technology is amazing because you can dig in at any given time what's going on, not having to wait for those quarterly reports. So, and truthfully, one of the things I'd like to learn about, now that I have a little more time on my hands, is about like what a lot of the prop tech can actually do. And if you want to get to know your clients, what a great way to track calls. And, there's that whole other section. So I think it's helping for sure. I think that AI is such a big part of the world that's coming. And there's got to be ways that AI can also help real estate. And there's going to be a lot more narrative about that coming out, especially here in Edmonton. There's some projects that are going to be started to get people in real estate thinking how technology can actually make us better.
It's definitely an exciting time with technology in real estate.
So
here's another one. Sustainability is kind of, even through the pandemic, kind of in the forefront of kind of our world today, and especially trends with LEED and WELL kind of gaining more traction in real estate. I mean, what do you kind of see in the next couple of years? Is this going to be kind of, if you don't have a LEED building, like you're kind of on the back burner, or kind of what's your thought on sustainability on a go forward basis?
It's real, it's relevant, it's important, and it's here to stay. And I have to tell you, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because I remember back, 10 years ago, we're looking at energy efficiency buildings and dealing with big tenants. And then we'd say, okay, we'll do this. You have to pay an extra $4 a foot. And they'd be like, whoa, wait a sec. I don't want to pay for that. Whereas now it's almost, from a tenant perspective, there are some tenants that are asking it. They understand that their costs could go down with op cost savings. But beyond all that, in real estate investing, like ESG was something that was real before. The last 2 years has heightened it, and every part of that, not just environmental, but even the social side of it. And in Alberta, we're seeing about some of the sovereign wealth funds pulling out of investing in Alberta because they don't like, our dirty oil. And so, even around the boardroom tables, at our public companies, at other public companies, it's a real thing. It's real, it's measurable, and it's not going away. So the people who think that it's a fad are sorely wrong, because I look at, you know, probably many people on this call, I look at my daughters, like, it's important how companies give back. It's important what they offer. Like, it's a bigger deal now, I think, to society than it ever was before. And the other side of it, if you look at the environmental stuff and sustainability, like 40% of greenhouse gas emissions come from commercial buildings around the world. So like, something's got to give. If we're ever going to hit the targets that are being set for us, commercial real estate has to step up.
Awesome. I mean, kind of building off the last couple of questions, is like, if you were to kind of pick a few trends for the next 5 years for our industry, what could you see kind of that those driving trends being?
And you know, this isn't me being smart, because we can sit all around too, but the grow local, be local, support local, is really taken off, and I see that hanging in there too. You know, even conversations I'm having with other developers about, you know, instead of all the offshore manufacturing, like I think you're starting to see that change. I think that's important. It's too bad, because it's kind of the opposite of being global. You know, it's like being maybe a little protectionist, and that's kind of the way the world is right now. But I think that's important. You know, this whole interest rate discussion and inflation discussion, it's hard not to pay attention to it. I was a bit surprised it didn't even raise the interest rates a little bit. And I mean, that's good in real estate, right? But what I've seen before, what's slaughtered real estate, is if the government doesn't raise those interest rates, and then all at once they, you know, put up a point or a point and a half, and you start that slide. So that makes me a bit nervous. But I still think that whatever the cost of money is going forward, it's going to dictate cap rates. It's going to dictate development. And so I think that's a big important part of it. You know, we've seen the supply chain disruptions in development, and, you know, I know projects where, you know, the quotes went from 8 million to 10 million to 12 million in the last 4.5 months, which kills your development yield. So I think that there has to be ways to build a little more economically, because when the cost of construction are going up, but rents aren't going up. Heck, I'm no accountant, but the yields. And so I think that's a big part of it too. And you're going to see more creativity in real estate, no matter what, but you're going to see like even greater creative partnerships, you know, ways to reduce costs. Like, it has to be, because there's a need out there. There's a need. You just need to find a way to do it. And the answer can't always be, if you don't pay me X for rent and I don't get this spread on cap, I can't do the development. Like, can't isn't an option. You need to figure out a way to make it work. So I think that's going to be one of the trends, Alex, is just different ways to fund projects.
Kind of going back to that interest rate comment, I mean, can you kind of, I mean, through your career, you would have seen a lot of this. Can you kind of go back and speak maybe of when the bank did raise rates quickly? Like, was it a pretty immediate effect on real estate in that sense? Like, was there almost an immediate, you know, we need to see a higher spread off the bonds for cap rates? Like, was it an overnight shift, or was it, I mean, you had to wait to see kind of those, you know, let the dust settle and see those new transaction trends come in, or kind of, I mean, how long did it take? I mean, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we're going to be seeing it, whether it's in the next couple of months or year, like interest rates most likely will be rising. So
yeah, exactly. You know, in the past, information didn't come as quick. So like when the Bank of Canada was meeting, and now I'm going to date myself, but, you know, we didn't have our phones, and it wasn't like instantaneous. So it was like, okay, you know, the conversation would have to happen. So it's not like it happened overnight, but you could feel a shift. There were, you know, when there was the threat in the past of interest rates rising, investment tended to stop. It was like, well, wait a sec, like, if I can tie in my financing at a low rate, that makes sense. I'll push it through. But again, there's that risk. And remember, the closer you go back to the 80s, the scars from the 80s existed. So when I started developing in the mid 90s, I'd hear those stories all the time, because they were still fresh for people, you know, like, oh, the banks killed us, or this or that. And so, you know, to answer your question, I think that what's good now is there's a lot of discussion about it. You know, we all know when the rate hikes are coming. Everyone talks about, like, I think it's in lockstep, and it's not going to be an instant, you know, downfall. And again, unless they raise it 2% one time or 1%, like that's if the quantum is big enough, it'll kill the housing industry, right? It'll kill the development industry, because then what happens to cap rates? And then, you know, if there's not enough of a spread, then, you know, the big funds start investing in bonds again.
Yeah, your yield spread would just be killed.
Absolutely.
Kind of moving on then, this is kind of a crystal ball question, but what's your prediction for Alberta's economic future? I mean, we've kind of seen a huge, crawl back in the price of oil. I mean, Alberta's, sort of diversify its industries. I mean, do you think there's some excitement kind of on the forefront? I mean, Edmonton industrial is incredibly hot right now. You're seeing a lot of action. So, I mean, kind of what's that prediction?
I think the narrative on Alberta changed like significantly in about September, October last year. And what I mean by that is, again, being connected with capital markets and Bay Street, staying, like, it's not that people were anti-Alberta. They were just kind of, it wasn't relevant. There was other opportunities in the world, and Alberta's Alberta. And then, there's all this talk about combustible fossil fuels and how bad they are. Well, there's an opportunity to have non-combustible fossil fuels. And so, you're now hearing words like hydrogen, and you're hearing about what Dow is doing in Fort Saskatchewan with their $10 billion ethanol cracker, and, carbon capture and storage. And those things were all around, but it wasn't like top of mind. And I think with oil coming back up to where it is and realizing that some of these companies could make money at $30 a barrel, and now it's at, 85, 90, and they're increasing their dividends and they're hiring back, even though many of those companies aren't investing their capital back in the province yet, which is what we need. Mm-hmm. I think it feels like it's sort of the beginning of the change. And remember when that company out of New York bought the boat tower in Calgary and that other building in the States, they packaged it together early during COVID. It was interesting. They had a partner and people said, hey, well, maybe they just wanted to get the other building really bad and the boat was a throw-in. But then when that same company on their own bought that office tower just before Christmas in Calgary for $475 million, my phone started ringing from Bay Street and people are like, hey, what do they see that we don't? And so I think like that herd mentality is starting. And then, you hear about like the tech growing all over the place and, things changing. And I know we have a long way to go. Like Alberta is not out of the woods by any means. Yep. But, even that article that was in the Calgary Herald last week where they had positive absorption for the first time forever, there's still a ton of vacancy. But even the narrative of that article was like, hey, maybe we're back. And you know what? We do that as Albertans, right? Like we're trying to find that rosy time. So in my opinion, I very much believe that the economy will be strong. And that's a bold statement. People have money. We need to get people back feeling comfortable. We need to get migration in again. Yep. And if you can have all of that, how on earth did our housing market thrive during COVID? But it did, right? It did. Yep. I didn't see that one coming, Alex. Let me tell you. No. So, a lot of positive things. I think because of the media and because of information, we're always trying to find the dark clouds, and for sure they exist. But it feels pretty good right now.
Honestly, this is an extremely exciting time to be in Alberta again. So I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years.
If I didn't actually believe that, then I'd be a crazy person to leave my employment job and make out on my own, right?
Very good point. Very good point.
I actually believe there was, good economy ahead.
Absolutely. So I guess moving towards more Edmonton focused, I mean, I like to kind of take both sides of the coin here. What do you view Edmonton's greatest strengths, but also our weaknesses right now?
Our strengths are our people. That's not cliche. Like we are this hardy group of people who, walking here today in the wind and the rain and everything else. And we're all still here too. And Edmonton always seems to find a way to prosper in one way, shape, or form. So I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. I think that in commercial real estate, like there's lots of land, there's lots of, I'll use this term. I didn't coin this. Someone else coined this, but we're not overdeveloped. We're like under demolished, right?
I agree. Yep.
People say that. So I think there's a great opportunity to sort of repurpose some buildings, and there's some pretty creative people. And unfortunately, some of the prices are low, but fortunately, that gives developers an opportunity to do creative stuff and change things. Mm-hmm. So like, I think that's important. I think that's a strength. I think as Albertans, we're still pretty highly regarded. Again, from Edmonton's perspective, I love what's happening in Fort Saskatchewan and all around. And I saw the deal today in Orem Business Park. Like there's big announcements that are starting to come again, and they haven't been for a while. So I think that just builds on people's optimism, builds momentum. So I think that's a strength. I think at the same time, Alex, one of the weaknesses is as Edmontonians, we're kind of like head down, work hard. That's great. But we don't stand up and say, no, listen, again, fossil fuels aren't horrible. The combustible ones, yes, they're a challenge. But what if we take this technology and create clean fossil fuels? And I think there's going to be more of that coming out, but we haven't really been known to be like beating the drum. But it's a common conversation now amongst all different levels of government, amongst the business community. So I think you'll see more of that coming out, that we'll all become ambassadors again. And I guess we took for granted that oil and gas was the driver for so many years. I didn't need to be an expert on in situ oil production, right? I feel like now in commercial real estate, we all have a bit of a responsibility to become at least well-versed on hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, like why that's going to make a difference, why companies are, guys, I don't even know what an ethanol cracker is that Dow's building, but I'm going to find out because they're going to spend $10 billion to do it. And if we're going to be salespeople for our community and our industry, we need to give the people not from here something to be hopeful about.
Yeah, adversity really brings out, the meaning for change. And that's definitely a good point of, we need to stop kind of sitting in the shadows of, this, like, feeling bad about it. This is kind of our livelihood and something that we should parade around and be proud of. So excellent.
Yeah.
Moving on, kind of the education side for, the younger members on the call and throughout the DLs, is there a course you've completed or, something you'd recommend to the DL members?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't have a specific course to say you should take this, because I honestly believe any course anytime is good, whether it's about real estate or not. In the past, I've taken, through the U of A, I took a negotiating course, and I thought, well, I know how to negotiate it. But, even being in that course, it's interesting. It has you thinking different about those things. One of the things that I won't say it's a mistake, but, I had the opportunity at Melcor, right, to take all kinds of courses. And I was so focused on work I didn't, and that's fine. But, now in my time, I'm going to take more courses, because I think that learning has to be lifelong. And we hear that a lot too, but I do think it's important. And it's also a great opportunity to network.
Yeah.
Like if you go to a course that has nothing to do with real estate, well, you're in a room with a bunch of people that don't do with real estate. And I'll bet you that people on this call and people in the industry will tell you a story about someone they met at a course that had nothing to do with real estate that they ended up doing a deal with, or knew a person. So I think that's important. And for people who work for companies who support that, man, if they're going to pay for it, do it. Like, don't wait.
It's free knowledge. I mean, from my experience, just building off of that, I find if I learn one new thing from a course, it's worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even if it's just one small minor detail, it's always beneficial.
I'd agree.
So we're kind of going off of that, besides courses, like ever-changing worlds, starting a new company, like how do you expand your industry knowledge base? Like, are there like must books, like books you must read? Like, you kind of switch from the institutional side to now entrepreneur. So
so there's a list. There's a ton of books. Anyone can Google it right now. So I'm going to give you an answer that's maybe a bit off the cuff, but first of all, I think how you expand your industry knowledge is talk to as many people as you can. Ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to just reach out. And you'd be surprised. Heck, we all like to talk, especially about what we do. We tell you all the wins. We never tell you the losses. But so I think that's really important too. But there are some books that I read because I think it's good too. But and I'll just, some that I did recently, and a couple were gifts, which was great. But Phil Knight wrote Shoe Dog, which is about the creation of Nike.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to actually learn the trials and tribulations of what was a startup and the ups and downs, it kind of gives you an appreciation. And the reason I liked reading books like that is, remember, when we're commercial real estate, we're trying to provide these solutions for our clients, and our clients in most cases are entrepreneurs. And I think it's important to sort of understand some of the things that they go through too. I'm reading Will Smith's autobiography right now, which is actually pretty interesting too. And I don't know if this was Will's intent, but I mean, it talks about the ups and downs and the drive to be better and the drive to push yourself. And sometimes, you push yourself too hard. I think that's pretty easy. And so there's two more books I want to talk about. So one of the books, I got to think about this one, but it's a book by Gary Bishop. It's called Dirty Word That Runs with Truck Yourself. And it sounds ridiculous, but you guys, it's a small book. I got it from a friend in the industry years ago. And it was a great book for self-reflection. And basically he's like, quit taking yourself so serious and just sort of sit back. And, it's a great reading on the plane kind of book, but it's weird, when you're reading on the plane and people look at the book you're reading, they're like, wait a sec. And then this is the last one, and people are going to think I've lost my mind because it was actually published in 1936. But Dale Carnegie, like How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
Believe it or not. And so again, some people have teased me for saying this one because, well, that was a long time ago. It was, but the fundamentals about the soft skills that are required for building relationships and being a salesperson and being a speaker, like it hasn't changed. And I've got these little cheat sheets of these points that I carry around with me that are, yes, they're self-evident, but still, like it's an easy read, but it gave me a lot of comfort that like everyone goes through these challenges. And I can tell you, Alex, I'm still to this day, I'm petrified to public speak. I'm nervous as crap right now. Like that has never changed.
Easier when you're on the camera, right? So you can't even see people on this. It's fine. So
for sure. But I don't want people to misunderstand. There are some fantastic leadership books. There are some fantastic real estate books out there. David Chilton, Rich Dad Poor Dad is kind of the basis for that type of real estate investing. So I think it's all there. But just like my comment about taking classes, to me, hard to find time to read. But when you do, it's kind of like a nice way to get your mind working in a different direction.
Awesome tips.
Yeah.
Great. Now I can move back.
Just to defend myself. So I have to say, so the Dale Carnegie book is the largest selling book of all time. They sold over like 30 million copies. So if anyone wants to Google and say, Darin, you are so old, and I'm saying, and they still sell to this day. Sorry, go on, Alex.
Yeah, no worries. Kind of moving back to your career. What career accomplishment or project are you kind of most proud of?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for putting that picture up.
There you go.
I know I sent that one to you. That was a friend of mine, Brad Ferguson, when he was with Economic Development Edmonton. He and I were talking one night, and like we were just mad because again, there were so many negative comments coming out about Edmonton and this and that, and we're like, there's this great tech community, there's startups, like there's a pretty cool group. So we said, like, we should do something like meaningful, and why don't we put a message on a building? And full disclosure, they've refined the message. We put it up. What's crazy? I took heat from this. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, and I'll call him out. It was David Staples from the Journal, and he's like, that's offensive. Like, dude, all we're trying to do is sort of get a message. And what's really cool is this shows up in so many Instagram posts, like from people that are here and the rest of it. And I still think that it's an important part of Edmonton. So, I know that sounds like a minor project, but that was something like to me that had far-reaching legacy. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, you know what? I had the pleasure of working with and building some pretty incredible teams and people that I care a lot about and mean a lot to me. And, when you talk about accomplishments, when I see these people going on in their careers and getting promoted and doing different things, it sounds cliche, but it's kind of cool. It's like, I remember when. Yeah, so that's important. Beyond that, we talked, the IPO was pretty cool. Like that was a work hard, team comes together, launch it, celebrate the win, move forward. So that was pretty good. And beyond that, you know what? I'm really proud of the relationships that I've created with people that, I was really nervous this last month, leaving Melcor, and like I'm losing my identity because I was always Darin with Melcor. And it's just, I'm really thankful for the people that are like reaching out and want to know what's happening and want to make sure I'm okay. So that's one of the things that I'm actually really proud of as well.
It's really amazing in this industry is that as much as we deal with real estate and properties, it's always the people. Work in such a personable industry where that really is the most important thing. And you totally touched on it. Edmonton's a big city, but it's a small community. It feels like it's the biggest, smallest city, I think.
Very much.
Feeling. Yeah.
Very much.
So kind of moving on, started a new company. What are you looking forward most to the next chapter of your career?
So thanks for putting that picture in. For the people that don't know, that's the McKinney building on 102nd, 104th. A friend of mine and I bought that. And this is not a backdrop. This is actually
it's real brick.
That building there too. So, buying this building to me, I do love the vibe of 104th Street. I love, what's happened downtown in the past. I know there's struggles now for sure. But, if I was going to be an ambassador and like to continue to try to promote Edmonton, I mentioned earlier about you have to have some skin in the game. Well, when I was with Melcor's got plenty of downtown skin in the game. Like I get that. And so for me, this was pretty important. I don't know what the future is for the building, still working through some ideas, maybe office condos or something. So that's an important part of it too. For me also, like, as I've touched on a couple things, Alex, there's learning that I always wanted to do, but it was like a side gig. Like I said, I want to learn about hydrogen. I want to learn about AI more. I want to know what it means. You know, I had the fortune of being involved with Startup in Edmonton way back when we were part of the founders.
Oh, wow.
I got involved there. I don't know anything about tech. I thought, what a cool way to get to know about tech. And again, have some great friends and people that's sort of grown up from that too. So I'm interested in you know, the tech world. Encouraged by, you know, Innovate Edmonton. Like, I'm delighted we got that deal done at December 31st for the Melcor REIT building downtown. I think that's really important for Edmonton. I think it's important for Melcor. I think it's important for the Innovate, and that culture exists. There's been so much work done to cultivate this innovation culture. And now, like, there's gonna be a showpiece that can actually try and build on that. So I want to get more involved in that. You know, I think I have an obligation to this community to be an ambassador. And, you know, I've always enjoyed the charitable side of things. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, that's how I got my job at Melcor. I was volunteering at Junior Achievement, and I needed to go ask Tim Melton for money because the golf tournament was at the links. So, you know, one of the things that Melcor is, the foundation has always said, like, if you give back to the community will give to you. And it's true. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I want to do more of that. And, you know, I'm not going away by any means. I'm going to be around, but, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can sort of pick and choose where perhaps I might have, you know, the most impact, and be able to focus on the stuff that, like, I really have passion about. So
that's an excellent thing to say. I mean, the focus for the DLs this year too, I think, is kind of giving back as well. I mean, I think, like you said, it's incredibly important. We're all pretty lucky to live in the city we do.
Yeah.
And definitely a great time to start giving back. Number 20.
Wow.
So put yourself in our shoes right now. It's like, what would you teach or tell yourself? What would you do? What wouldn't you do? Or is it all just wouldn't change a thing?
So every real estate person will tell you they wish they bought more land when it was really cheap and when we knew where the development was going. But sort of beyond that, the fact that there is a developing leaders program is just so amazing to me. And that's why, like, I've been flattered to be asked to be here, and I've been involved for a couple of years now doing things. I think that is so important. You know, I sort of by accident got to be able to talk to the Lauren Braithwaite's and the John Loves and the Tim Meltons and the Ralph Jones. Like, again, I think, you know, and I had my peer group, but it wasn't a sort of formal process. And so I think that's really important. And I'll tell you what too, is like being able to take some of those relationships beyond Edmonton. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can tell you when we were growing, you know, not only through Western Canada, but in the US, you know, we had some great existing relationships that really helped. We weren't just this Canadian company going back in the US and like, where are you from? What do you do? And so, you know, being 35 and under, get your name out there. Like, it's not shameless self-promotion. It's just connecting with people. Everyone wants to tell their story. The other thing too, you know what? I probably should have been more open to admitting to what I didn't know. You know, I mean, heck, I be careful I tell the story, but I remember going to Oxford from Cambridge, and I was running Edmonton when it was Edmonton Center. It wasn't Edmonton City Center. There was Edmonton Center and Eaton Center. The Gramesians on one side, Oxford on the other. And I got poached away from Cambridge, and they wanted me to be like the manager. And it's like, I was this trainee at Cambridge for a couple of years, but yeah, I can do it, right? I'm good. And I remember sitting in meetings, and they're using words I didn't know what they're, you know, and it's like I'm taking notes, and I'm going after, it's like, what is return on equity? Like, what's this mean? And so I always thought, though, I had to pretend like I knew everything. And I think the world's changed. Like, it's okay now to say, like, I don't know, I'll get back to you. So I think that's just part of a confidence that everyone will get. And so, you know, I probably should have done more of that. It worked out okay for me. Don't get me wrong. I'm very thankful, but the road might've been a bit less bumpy. I admitted I didn't know. And the other thing too, and this does sound self-serving, but like build your resume. If you have opportunities to branch in different types of real estate, do it. If you have opportunities, again, to volunteer, like do it. Like, that's really important, because it is so much about character and doing deals and understanding people now. Everyone looks on LinkedIn, right? What do we do now? You meet someone on the street, you Google them. Like, so like it's all open, and it's all, but I think it's important to try and sort of build your brand that way. Mm-hmm.
And you make a really good point of saying, just talk to people, like reach out. Like, our industry, again, is so personable that, you know, take someone for a coffee. Like, you're exactly right. Yeah. We're open and willing to speak.
Yeah. Anyone who doesn't have time for that, and I get it, we're all busy, yep, but I think they're missing the opportunity that you never know where the next deal comes from. You just never, yep, know. And it's also not instant. you never know. You're running into people. And of course, COVID is like separated by 2 years, but running into people I haven't seen in a couple of years. But, still, it's not hard to keep in touch. And everyone you talk to, you can learn a lot from them, good and bad, right? You can learn what not to do.
Absolutely.
So I think, the group that's, involved in the developing leaders, like keep doing it, like keep networking. And like Anand promised, like we'll be meeting in person hopefully soon and back to events. And, I very much believe that the roaring 20s is going to be back. I don't know if it'll be the same degree as it was in the 1920s, but I just feel like everyone's ready to get to the starting line again. Mm-hmm. And, we started in June and then we pulled back in July and start. I think I'm being optimistic, but if we can just get beyond all this negativity and just get going, I think that you'll see there'll be a big level of optimism, not just amongst real estate, not just about Edmonton, but in all of Canada, I hope. That's my wish.
It's hopefully an exciting time of actually getting to see each other again at events. Looking forward to it. But
totally.
I got one last question, and this is the hardest one of the day.
Oh boy.
Will the Oilers make the playoffs? Don't want to put you on the spot, but this is the last one.
Yeah, I've been their fans since they came into the league. Like, I never give up. Will they make the playoffs? I hope. I want them to. I want to say yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to say no when they have flashes of brilliancy, and then they crash and burn, and then the flash of brilliancy comes back. So I guess tomorrow's game will be an indicator. And we got a new coach this morning, and it's not Jay Weaver. He's been around forever. He's not a new coach, and so people are freaking out, but he knows the system. I don't know. It's crazy. Hey, don't you remember after game 13, weren't we all planning the Stanley Cup parade?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Teams of the year. And, wasn't Draisaitl going to get 50 goals in 27 games based on his output and the rest of it? And I don't know. It's interesting, but I'm still a fan. I'm still a fan. I'm not turning off the TV too early, because in the past, you turn off the TV when they're down by a couple goals and suddenly they come back and win it all. And it'll be really cool when we can get the arena full again, and that can be an event to go to.
Yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Darin, that's it. I really like to thank you for your time today and throughout the questions. Really appreciate it from all the DLs. It was really informative. And Anand, I want to pass it off to you if you have any closing remarks to this, or
nothing too special. Thanks, Alex, for doing it. Reach out to Alex if you have ideas for future events. And as Darin says, we'll be back in person soon. I felt like the last quarter of the talk there, Darin, was just like an advertisement for the developing leaders.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
We didn't pay him, so don't.
That's right. Well, thanks, Ed. And also, like, I wanted to thank you and all of NAIOP, not just developing leaders. Like, you've grown in your presence, which is important. You've grown in your ability to actually affect change. You and I talk about policies, and then too, your industry advocacy. Like, now more than ever, the industry needs you. And I think that NAIOP in Edmonton is in such a perfect position because you have that credibility. You've earned that over the last years, the work you guys and girls have done, which is really important. So, like, keep doing it, and don't be afraid to continue reaching out to developers, because we're all getting the benefit of the work you're doing. And maybe it's about time that developers support that.
Well, thanks so much. And truly thanks to everybody for coming out. We'll talk to you soon.
Just a small note, just to getting back to the networking thing, we'll be launching a kind of a monthly drink series for the DLs. So it'll be a great chance to kind of get out, have a few drinks, and meet everybody in the industry. So really looking forward to getting back, seeing everybody in person. And again, Darin, thank you so very much. That was fantastic.
And my pleasure. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing what you do in the future.
You'll see me walking up and down 104th Street.
Perfect.
See you later.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.